Thank you for joining us. My name is Courtney Tedrick, and I'm the Community Engagement Department Head at Wheaton Public Library. Tonight, we are delighted to bring you another art demonstration in partnership with the DuPage Art League. Founded over 60 years ago, the DuPage Art League is dedicated to promoting and encouraging the visual arts through classes, workshops, gallery exhibits, and public programs such as this one. We are grateful to the DuPage Art League for arranging tonight's demonstration by artist Maria Delton. Maria has always had her hands in art one way or another. She studied with Ed Patchkey at Northwestern University and received a BA in art. She then switched gears and spent several decades as an art director and creative director with Leo Burnett. There is very little that scares her. Maria picked up painting again about 4 years ago and decided to focus on watercolor. Please join us in welcoming Maria.
Thank you. So about 4 or 5 years ago, my children got tired of me moaning about how I missed paint and I missed all this. And they're like, please go do something. So I started with the Chicago Urban Sketchers, and it was great and it was fun. And I kept bringing an easel and paint. And also I kept having this inkling in the back of my head. I'm like, this is nice, but there's something I don't like about it. What is it? And then I realized it was because I had spent years drawing storyboards and layouts and sketching. I'm like, this isn't scratching the itch for me. And they were all like, maybe you should try the plein air group, please. So I did, and that opened up everything. I had never really painted plein air. I'd done lots of studio work. Ed Paschke would come in a room and you'd be painting and he'd just kind of loom over you and be like, are you sure about that? And then leave. So you had to figure it out for yourself, which was good in the end. But I did a lot of plein air and I really gravitated toward watercolors. I had done watercolors in college, but I treated them like oil paints. I was doing hyper-realistic stuff. It was all very tight. I never really learned to let water do its thing. Water's like a cranky cat versus like maybe oil paints, which are a very well-behaved golden retriever and will do what you say. And so you have to learn what it's going to do and anticipate. And like what John Singer Sargent said, it's making the best of an emergency. And when I paint watercolors, I feel like I'm running an obstacle course in the dark. And not to scare you, but the more you prepare, the more, and the reason I talk about this is you get the results you want. You see all these great, luscious, juicy, loose watercolors, and you're like, I want that. How do I get that? Practice and knowing how to nail that color on the first time. The worst thing that can happen is when you sit there and you go over the same color 4 times and suddenly you're wondering why you have mud. So, and I've figured out ways for me that help me get to those results faster, and I'll talk about that. Surrounding me are some of the what I call last season's pieces, because I do a lot of art fairs. And so this is what was in the tent at the end of the season. And then I took some master classes. I studied with Ekaterina Maltseva, who's this Russian who teaches in Italy in Italian, and I'm Italian. And so the only ways you can take her class is either by knowing Russian or by knowing Italian, or you just watch her paint. And that taught me that watercolor has a life of its own. And so I internalized that a lot. I did a lot of YouTube stuff. Some of it was great, some of it not as great. Then I took a class with Alvaro Castanet, who I probably idolize way more than I should. But I learned so much, and I took it last May, and I internalized a lot of what he said. And I didn't want to just go out and make paintings like he does. He does his style. I want to do my thing. I love color, if that's not obvious, sometimes to the point of Crayola box. And it took me till now to kind of make it my own. And so the slides, if you could show the 4 paintings that I sent, these are just what I've done recently, and they're not here because I haven't framed them yet and I'm still staring at them. But it does what I've been looking for, which is controlling the focus of a painting. And what I mean by that is there's always something that catches your eye within a piece, and it's a little corner, and everything else just kind of fuzzes away because it's a glance, it's a memory. And I'm finally figuring out now how to create that. and mastering what water does to create focus and to create stuff that draws you into that focus by being out of focus. Does that make sense? So this is one of the new ones. This is probably a little bit bigger than this guy. And you can guess where it is. The reason I like these is because, yes, it's very tight down here, and you get the feeling of the city and the grit. And there's a ton of buildings, and there's 65,000 windows, and former me would have been like, oh, let's count. And let's make, and I'm like, no, I am not doing that. And so a lot of experimenting, and I finally got to a place where I can suggest this stuff, and you know what it is, and your brain fills it in. When we worked in advertising, they were like, leave something for the viewer to solve. Don't tell them everything like Procter and Gamble. It gets really boring. So the same goes for paintings. Let the viewer fill it in. You know enough of what this is to be like, yeah, I know where this is, but I'm not telling you that there are shades up here and there's a person there and there's a Venetian blind. Your brain fills that in, and then you enjoy it more when it's like that. Can we show the next one? Again, a popular view. And if it's not obvious, this was what was just catching me. Because I'm like, those reds and then this bright white, and then, yeah, there's 3,000 other shiny tall buildings, but we're not going to talk about those right now. So I just pushed them out of focus. Next one. Oh, wait, no. Oh, I sent you the wrong one. Okay, this is my study for a loop alley. And these are things I do to learn how to paint it when I get to the final one. Can you go to the next one? Here's one. Wall Street. This one could have been a nightmare, but because I thought about it and I practiced it 6 ways to Sunday with different media, when I got to the final paint, I knew what I wanted to do, and I knew how to get the colors I wanted pretty quickly without having to make mud, I hope. Anyway, so one thing I do is when I paint, can we show the reference photo?
Yeah.
First, the photo. So this is Ludwig's in Sitka, Alaska. It is the fanciest restaurant in this tiny little town. And the reason I picked this, my daughter lives in Sitka, and every time I go up there, I wander around and take pictures like a weirdo for days. And Sitka is very much like, if you remember the old TV show Northern Exposure, it's that. It's characters wandering around. It's drop dead gorgeous scenery, which is why I created this composition that there's so much sky, because you just see sky and mountains. And every once in a while, there's this really bright building. And that to me is just attractive. I want to paint it. I can't wait to touch it. And so when I figured this out, the first thing I did was I did a charcoal sketch. Can you find that one? And this is just, it's about this big, and it's a mess, but it tells, what I'm doing is I'm training my brain. I'm not doing these to have these as, oh, look, I did a charcoal thing. No, I could do this with mascara and lip gloss. I don't care. But charcoal, the beauty of charcoal is it lets you fuzz out things you don't want to emphasize, and it lets you keep sharp the part of it that you find important. And for me, it was this. It's this bright, bright contrast and white and all those bright colors. Then I did one I decided to do in color pencil. No, that's marker. But that's okay, that's fine. I do a lot with what they're called pit pens. And this is my book of those where I just will sit and practice, and I will do hundreds of just learning what the colors are. Oh yeah, there's the color pencil one. Yeah, but again, same idea. Very loose, very rough. I'm teaching myself where the colors go, and I'm teaching myself where the darks are and where to leave alone for the whites. Very important. And I do them over and over and over. I did one in another sketchbook. I did one. I will just grab any Crayola crayon. I don't care what it is. I'll just keep doing it over and over. And what keeps it interesting is picking a different medium. And then you learn from that as well. So this is, so that's the marker one that I did for this. And you start getting a feel for it and you start seeing where the lights are and where the darks are, which is really important when you get to watercolor. Because I don't like to correct. And I find if you do have to correct a watercolor, it stands out and you can see it and it looks wrong. And it's like this bad Band-Aid and nobody wants that. So that's what I do for that. I will practice, practice, practice. And they don't have to take long. These each took, 20 minutes. But what that does is teaching you when you get ready, you're like, all right, I know where this is now. And I give the analogy of when you see an Olympic skier go down a slalom run on a mountain, he's done that a lot. This is not the first time he's done that. So it's like learning a map or learning where you're going to do what. So even if it looks haphazard, which it kind of is, I still know, like, I want to start with my warms. I want to lay down where some of the darks are. I know what to keep, not touch with color. And so that helps you get to the result you want. Because lots of times when I first started too, my friends were like, Maria, you're painting watercolor like oil. Is that what you wanted? Because I'd look dry and they'd look scratchy and muddy because I'd keep trying to fix the same thing over and over and over and over, and that doesn't work. So I'm learning to let go. This is like therapy for me. I'm learning that mistakes are okay. What matters more is the energy that goes into that painting because it will feed right back to people. And I see it. I have I did a lot of focus groups and when I was in advertising, and I've learned to read people. And when they come into the tent, I will watch them look at something and they're like, you didn't draw everything, but I know exactly where this is. I can feel it. That's what you want. You paint what you feel, don't paint what you see. And it sounds silly, but the more you practice it, the more you can capture that contrast and that vibe that an image gets that stopped you in the first place. Okay, I think I'm done unless there's questions right now. Sure.
Do you like draw that in pencil first before you do paint, or do you just go right to painting that?
This is just marker. Oh.
Do you draw this previously and then just fill it in with the different color paint, or?
When I use the painting, I will do a pencil drawing, very rough. That one's not so rough, I got carried away. But I will do a lot of direct watercolor with big brushes to force myself to not overthink. This is just straight marker. There's really no pencil. I find the less of that I do, the freer the painting is. I've practiced this painting, hopefully not too much that I get stale, but there's a fine line. You don't want to overthink it. You don't want to make it miserable. Anyway, anyone else? People were asking about my palettes. So one thing I do before I go point to those, whenever I have a palette, I make what I call my flashcards. And what these are is I take all the colors on my palette and I play and I start making different colors. I will mix ultramarine blue with transparent orange, for example, just to see what it's going to do. Because this is stuff I need to know in my head and be fast when I want to nail something in the watercolor. So to practice as much of this as possible, you memorize them. It's just memorizing a multiplication table. You memorize what these colors do. And then you get surprising results. Like people are like, don't use black. Why? If you mix it with yellow, look at this gorgeous green. It's beautiful. It's like metal. So play. Don't be afraid to play. I do this for all of them. I keep them around. I carry them with me if I do plein air, and I will briefly look at it before I go and paint because it's just a refresher. Because sometimes you're looking at your palette, you're like, I'm just going to use this phthalo green. God help you. So anyway, what I'm using now, and I'm very fickle and I change palettes all the time because I get bored. What I had done recently was for the past couple falls, we would go to Indonesia for a few weeks. And so I made this palette to reflect a lot of the colors I see in Indonesia. Let me see. Yeah. That good?
Yeah.
Okay. And then what I also do is a cheat sheet. I do these for all of my colors. I will put them out and I will write down what they are. So when I have to refill it, I know what it is instead of guessing and making a mess. But also because I change palettes so often, I forget what is in these little pans. And so when I see that color, it's a very quick way for me to know what I'm doing. And so that's these colors. And then when I went back to Sitka, I'm like, Sitka has a whole different light. It has clearly whole different vibe. So I made a different one that is these colors. Does that work? Yeah. These palettes I got in Bali a few years ago, and I think they're from Japan. And what I like about them is when you spray the water on these for a little bit and you keep it shut, it keeps these moist. The only downside I have to these, maybe 2, 3, if you really push me, there are no individual like mixing pans within them. So that can get frustrating because then everything's like this giant scrambled egg pool of color by the time you're done. And I had been warned about this, but plastic will stain. And it's not for aesthetic reasons that I don't like that, but sometimes like the phthalo colors will be peeking up over the color you're mixing. And then you're like, is it really that color? Is it not? So we're going to find out. But that works well. And then I will go to IKEA and get like little plastic trays that are usually mostly white. If I'm doing plein air, it's easier to mix colors than this. And then I always carry stuff like this if I'm doing a big wash. Brush wise, I have almost no American brushes in my collections. I get a lot from Korea from a brand called Herond, and the link will be in the, sorry. Yes, that's a big boy. And I have even bigger ones that are going up to here. And these are wonderful because they have spring in them. They don't kind of go flat like a wash like this guy that's really soft. I love these. They have all kinds of brushes with textures, like this one. See, can you see it? Maybe not. If you get this wet, and I'll be using it later to make a corrugated roof, it just creates these lines for you, which you can use to make the lines, or you can do sideways and create other texture. I have crazy brushes. Some are made out of cactus root. They look like somebody ate it a little bit, but it's great. And they're made, some are goat hair, some are boar. I have a chipmunk one somewhere. I'm equal opportunity for, then I went and splurged and got the Alvaro Castanet brushes, which are gorgeous and do everything they promise. You could also buy a car, but this is great. But these are fabulous. The Alvaro Castanet brushes. There's a link to his stuff. He's one of my big influences, but he has his own line, like Mary Kay Cosmetics, of brushes. And they are wonderful because they hold a ton of color and they come to a point that holds its point. I have a lot of mop brushes that do nothing but just kind of like sit there and look at you. And these work very well. Also, the liners work really well. If you can see this. These I'm still learning to use because it's like, do I make a straight line? Sometimes. So those take practice. And I will do big sheets of newsprint where I'm just for a half an hour drawing lines to practice. A lot of it is practice because you touch the paper once in watercolor and it's like, I'm going to remember that forever. So practice, 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 practice. Not to make it drudgery, but then you get such great results and then you're happy with it. And then you keep doing more. A lot of people stop watercolor. They come and have confessional with me in the tent when I'm there. And they're like, well, I tried making a tree and they show me this thing that looks kind of like a snake. And I'm like, okay, take your brush and learn to make staccato moves. And suddenly it looks like a brush, but it's practice. It's just practice. There's no secret. And then you're happy about it. When people are happy about it, then they keep doing it. And I was frustrated for a long time too. So anyway, can I answer anything else or shall I begin?
Have a question from the audience. What brand of watercolor is your favorite, or do you mix brands?
I won't say what I said before because it's off color, but I'm pretty easy when it comes to picking paints. Daniel Smith is great. Daniel Smith, be careful. They have a lot of colors, and some I called convenience colors. And what you need to learn to do is read the paint tube, because sometimes on a color that looks like it's one pigment, there's probably 5 of them hiding in there. And what happens is when you start to mix it with another color, you instantly get mud and you don't know why. It's because there are 7 pigments being like, hey, look at me. So try to stick to single pigment. I like Graham for that. They have honey in them, beeswax, honey. They are beautiful colors. Schminky, I love. Their hues are so vibrant. I bought some Russian paints when we were in Bali called White Nights, and I think they sell them on Amazon now, and I have a few of them in here. Super saturated. For me, the more saturated, the better. There's nothing subtle about what I do. But I have no favorite brand. The most I use are Daniel Smith, a lot of Schminky, some Winsor Newton, and then the weirdo brands I find in other countries just to experiment. Except for glitter. I don't like glitter. No sparkles.
There's another question. Was there any concern about mold when getting the
No,
wet?
I could understand why, but I open these up so often that they air out anyway, and half the time they dry out and I'm disappointed. The only thing which I learned also the hard way was I put fresh paints in here and I thought I had let them sit enough to solidify, and then I had goo. Yeah, so there's a happy medium of moist to, you don't want peanut butter.
Maria, could you repeat the names of your brushes again for the
Sure.
audience? And we will share the links that Maria shared with us in the follow-up email.
So this one is Heron, spelled Herend, and they're in Korea, and they will ship to us, and they have beautiful collections of every brush you can imagine. There's another brand. These are called they're called Crazy Brush, and it's by another Korean brand called Eo, spelled EOEO. These you can get, they're the Alvaro Castanet series, but you can get them on AliExpress. And I believe the brand is called Kneef, spelled Kneef. Yeah, those are the big 3. And everything else, I don't know where I got it. Yeah. Yay.
Follow-up question with the brushes. How often do you clean your brushes, and what's the best thing you clean them with?
After every painting, I give them a good rinse with shampoo. If I'm going somewhere special, I will use baby shampoo to be nice. Oh, I haven't talked about paper. Good question. I love
Can you
arches.
tell us about what kind of paper you use?
Sure. Arches rough, of course, is my gold standard. However, if you don't want to spend that much on arches, there is a Chinese brand called Baohong, spelled Baohong, and I have a link to that later. And they have a rough version that is equal. In fact, this is Baohong right now, and I think this might be a cold press because I ran out. I will buy rolls of it, and rolls and rolls and rolls of it. You can also buy the sheets, and I've noticed sometimes the sheets are a little bit higher quality than the rolls. Maybe the rolls are student quality. Sure.
You use 300-pound paper or 140-pound?
I think it's 140. It says 300 gram, but it's not the super heavy one, but it's not the thin like 90 at all. So I'm right in the middle. Good. All right. So wake up. I always like to get the paper a little wet because it stretches the fibers and it keeps you from getting this really dry look. And then what I always keep on the palette that I'm using are just little strips of leftover watercolor to test colors. Because sometimes you don't want a surprise. Sometimes a surprise is nice, but when you're really being specific, it's not. So What I like to do also, yeah, I should have primed these. With this one, I'm going to use a little bit of an underglaze first to get some of that warmth coming through. And then as I keep going, as you do a lot in watercolor, the paint will become thicker and show you more of the darks. Wow, that was meaningful. Okay. Then I'm going to do the sky as a second phase because that's an all-in-one go thing and everything else needs to be dry first. So yellow ochre works pretty good. It's just a very gentle, I don't paint a lot with yellow ochre once I've laid down a wash because it's not transparent and it can make things muddy. So you have to be careful with it. Good. Then I learned where to keep the whites for my snow. And in like some of the bigger pieces I showed you, I really threw out of focus the background, but this is such a tighter scene. I'm going to minimize some of it, but I don't really have the depth of field to throw stuff out of focus. And also I like the rhythm of the whites as they appear, like the snow, the roof, the snow. There's something pleasing about that. And even though this building is going to be a bright red orange, I still want some yellow ochre underneath it because it gives it a little warm. It makes the yellow ochre in this painting will make you feel the sun. One thing about Sitka is the sun never gets higher than this. So it's always golden hour. So you're always seeing this golden sunlight, except for when it sets at 2:30 and everyone's depressed. But so I sometimes stop talking. So if you have a question, just yell. And then this house is a little bit more yellow. And I'm always very good about cleaning out my light colors after I do a painting, because when I go into it the next time, it's for a wash and that color needs to be pure. Because all of a sudden, if there's blue or green in there, then it's like, that's not what I wanted. So. All right, back here. And I like this big brush because I do stuff quickly and I don't fiddle. If I fiddle, yell, I should stop. Enough pink. Tell me if my head gets in the way. And the thing I'm still learning is watercolor dries 5 times lighter than what you put down. Okay. So this is still warm. And then there's also warmth in the shadows. So I always add a little bit of burnt sienna. And this looks garish right now, but then it fades and you don't even know it's there anymore. But it creates harmony with the colors. I have a ton of colors in my palette, but I try really hard to just keep it limited. Like what's driving my color choices for this painting are pretty much what is in that bright red orange house, and everything comes from there. Okay. Cobalt blue, shadow's friend. And I like getting a gray with cobalt blue and a quin burnt scarlet. All right. See, I practice this S turn or whatever it is. Then you just kind of leave that alone because the water's going to do stuff. That was technical, by the way.
Why didn't you start with the sky?
Because it has to have such a really delicate gradation and it's not really interacting with everything else, I'm going to do it afterwards. Also, because there was a reason when I first painted this. What I'm going to do is add a light wash of yellow ochre to this telephone pole. I'm going to let it dry. Then I'm going to paint over it with blue. And then I'm going to take it away. And then what will be left is the nice light color of the yellow ochre. I say that now. Yes. So. This one. There's sunlight on everything, so a lot of stuff gets yellow ochre. And what looks like a lot now will become almost invisible. And there's more yellow ochre here, but we don't really care what they're doing. Okay. That's white. Also, like if you have a camera and you set it to portrait, you can tell it where to focus. This is the same idea. So I want sharp focus on this house and everything else before and after. Really doesn't matter as long as it feels correct. And I don't want to have everything tight because then I'm not sharing with you what I want you to feel or see. So this house will be kind of messy and kind of loose. Once I get these basic colors in, it doesn't need to be the bright white. All right. There's little dabs of white, yeah, yellow ochre, but not too much. Then there's dirty snow. We don't know who did that. Yeah.
Maria, we have a question from the audience. What is the red color that you laid down after the ochre?
Oh, on the house? Quin Red from Winsor Newton. The house in this painting has a slight pink tinge to it, and I like the warmth it has because it kind of echoes with the main focus of the house, this guy. So, okay. Need to let this, if there are questions, I'll let this dry by itself. If not, I will use a hairdryer.
We do have a couple questions from the audience.
Sure.
One, you kind of touched on this, but do you ever paint without a sketch first?
Yes, but not this big. I will do, oh yeah, that's one of my other favorite activities. It's called 30 by 30 direct watercolor, and it happens on Facebook every June. And every day you must submit a little painting. It could be this big that you have done without any pencil. So direct watercolor. It's terrifying at first, but if you keep at it and everyone's in the same boat, it's kind of like Alcoholics Anonymous, it's okay. Everyone's sharing their work, and by the end of it, you will have progressed so much because you're teaching yourself to see without thinking, if that makes sense. Your brain really messes stuff up. Don't let it get in the way of your eyes. And that's what direct watercolor is brilliant for. So I highly recommend that practice. I've done it for a few years. Last year, I was contributing maybe once every 5 days, but It's amazing to see. Yeah.
And then where and why do you usually start to paint?
It depends on the effect I want. Sometimes I will start with the sky if it's not important, and then work my way down. For this one, what's driving it is I want that bright blue clear sky, and I don't want to have streaks and anything in it. I just want it pristine, because then so much is happening later. So it's really driven by the image. Each one's a little bit different. I will try to get like undertones in at first, so at least I have guideposts for myself. And also, sometimes when you just lay a pure color on white, it isn't really what you wanted it to feel like. And so just having a tiny little bit of glaze underneath steers it in the right direction, and then it creates more harmony.
Okay, and then why cobalt blue instead of ultramarine blue for the shadow mix?
For me, I will use ultramarine blue later when I want these super, super darks. Cobalt glows more for me, and it's a gentler mix for a lot of shadows. Ultramarine blue for me sometimes, to my eye, feels too harsh. One time I was in the tent and this man came in and introduced himself as an ophthalmologist. And he's like, I could tell you how your eyes work. I can see it on all your paintings. I'm like, oh, okay. But everyone sees differently. So what I perceive as needing cobalt blue, someone else may perceive as needing purple, or, and that's just me. So it is personal after a point. And as we get a little bit more into this, I will show you how I check my values. That is critical. You could paint this thing in Martian green and pink and purple, but as long as your darks are correct and your whites are correct, your brain just goes, yeah, that's cool. I know what that is. That's a street with a telephone pole and a house. The darks matter. The darks really, really matter. Not so much the color. I'm obsessed with color, so I'm going after the color. But if I don't nail those values, you won't believe the sunlight. You won't believe the shadows. And that's what makes that scene come to life. It's that extreme light and color. Yeah.
And what is the aha moment when your perspective made sense to you? The comment was your perspective is great. What is the aha moment when perspective made sense to you?
You mean drawing it? Or
Just, yeah, what is the aha moment when perspective made sense to you?
oh, you mean creating perspective?
I think so, yes.
Okay. I learned a bunch of tricks having studied drawing and all that. You block it in first in just big shapes without thinking about anything. And then I just really do use perspective. Try it with this, but it's like, if I sit here and I won't draw it out, but I will check my work as I draw if it's something that really relies on perspective like this. You start putting this in here, these lines all go to a point. These lines all go to a point. And so you're starting to see, where these endpoints are in the horizon. And of course, it's always going to be in the horizon. And so that's a very fast way of just checking if everything's making sense. It's not perfect, but your brain goes, yeah, that's okay. That's right. You didn't make a weird floating house. Yeah, I'm sorry if I don't answer well. And everyone's head, like I took this picture, so I was standing there. So I know where people's heads are. They're where my eyes are. And that's a very, you draw a line straight across, that's where all your heads go. And if someone's farther away, their head's still there, but they're just smaller from the bottom. And if someone's closer, their head's still on that line, but there's more of their body because they're closer. That's what makes it believable. And that's a form of perspective, I guess. And then there's atmospheric perspective where you blow stuff out in the background, but that really doesn't matter too much here. But yeah, the buildings, I was checking my work. I was checking the lines. I'm like, all right, is everybody going in the same direction at the same time? Because otherwise it feels wonky and you can't put your finger on it, but it doesn't feel right.
And then how long did you spend on the pencil sketch, and did you use a straight edge for the roof lines?
The pencil sketch was probably half an hour, and no, I winged it.
And then how do you choose to use the cloth or the sponge to dab paintbrush?
Oh, I think the sponge is more to get a lot of water out, and the towel is if I need something to just be damp and I'm using a little bit heavier paint. But it's normally what hits the brush first. There's not a lot of premeditation going on.
And then a member of the audience was wondering if they could see the reference photo again.
Sure.
I have it printed out.
Oh, wow.
So you want to hold it
Yeah.
under the camera so we can see. Thank you.
Does that work? Oh, there's a delay. Okay. Yeah. So here's my hero right here. And then everything else is going to play a supporting role. But what needs to happen and I need to nail are these darks and to keep this clean and bright because those are what makes this picture interesting.
One moment, we have an audience question, pardon me.
In the picture, is like on the side near the road snow?
Yes. This? Yeah, that's snow. That's why I didn't touch it. Don't touch white, ever. People will come find you. Yeah, okay. Let me just hit this with a hairdryer, because if you don't, things go bad. I'm sorry for the noise. Oh, should I turn off my mic? Or it doesn't matter? Okay, I'll do it far away. Good, okay, sky time. This is when we all pray to the sky gods. I want it wet first. Behaves much better than dry. This is some kind of poor squirrel. Okay. And I'm looking at the reflection right now. So where it's shiny, I know I've hit it with water. And I'm hitting the trees. I'm avoiding these bright roofs. This kind of stuff in the background, I don't really care. I don't want to hit this. Okay, now, how do I want to torture myself? Let's see. Yeah, it'll be okay. So this sky is mostly cobalt, and I'm going to use a little bit of manganese to warm it up, especially as I work my way down. And then, oops. I'm putting it in this bin so I don't ruin the rest of my flat area that has no dividers in it. And you want enough ready because you got to move fast with this thing. The last thing you want to do is leave half of it and then go back because it will look at you and be like, I'm dry now. Now what? All right. And you're safe while this thing is really wet. You can add more color, and I'm going to add more to the top. But I am working my way around this thing. I don't care if I go over the lamp, don't try and paint around a telephone pole. It never works out well. Because then you end up with all these little lines. Why is she not using a small brush? Because she's lazy. Okay, leave it alone. You can tip it so that it dries the way you want. And then you must always, 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 when you do these kind of things, clean this up right here, because what happens when you put it back down is it runs all over the place, right back onto the painting. And you don't notice till like 10 minutes later and it's misery. So that has to dry. And I try not to use a hairdryer when I do this because it pushes the paint around too much. If you just let it air dry, it becomes very soft and very nice, and then it looks perfect when it dries. And do not touch it now. It is what it is. We're all happy with it. And I'm going to wait till this is a little bit drier, and then I'm going to scrape off the paint off of the telephone pole. And then what you'll see is what looks like a highlight without really having to put paint on it.
So while we're waiting, I'll ask a question.
Sure.
I've been to many art fairs and I always stop by your booth.
I know.
So I'm glad we finally got to see you paint.
Thank you. I hope
I
this
put
is-
it on my calendar and I wrote you an email and said, hey, it's supposed to be happening in January.
Did I reply?
Yes, you
Oh, okay.
did. You did. You gave me the date because the library didn't know yet and everything. So anyway, so you've been painting for 4 years now.
I mean,
And-
I've always been.
I know
doing
you were at
something.
Leo Burnett.
Yeah.
But my question is like, what are your like goals? You know, like when do you feel like you've really made it? Or, you know, do you have when you go to the art fairs, do you have goals like, okay, if I want to sell 5 this week? Or, you know, and I just want to know like, what do you aspire to? Because I'm a beginner watercolorist and like my goal is maybe in 2 years, I'd like to do a show. Like that would be a good goal for me.
I think for me, when I did my first art fair, I was almost in tears. I'm like, no one's going to come in. No one's going to look at anything. It's going to be awful for 10 hours. But people do come in. And I think as I've watched people look at my work and I've learned to read them, what I get most excited about is when people stop dead in their tracks. Like people will be walking and they see something in my tent and it's this, and then it's this, and then they come in. I want that. I want that. I don't care if they buy or not. I want people's connection. When people stop and are like, I know what this feels like. I stand here all the time. I know exactly what that is. Oh my God, that is a win for me. Yes, it's nice to make money.
Thank you.
What's the next?
I want to get better at the shorthand of watercolor. And what I mean by that is you suggest things like with a dibble dabble, you know, spidery stroke, and someone's like, oh, that's a car. I'm like, yeah. Things like that. Always improve, like learning to control and not be fussy, because if you leave me alone, I will zoom this to 400% and paint every last damn thing in this painting. I don't want to do that. And it takes me a lot of self-control to not do that. So that's one of my aspirations, is to be able to be like, stop, let it go, figure out what your focus is and stick with it. That for me is important. That and the connection with people seeing my stuff and reacting the way I reacted when I saw it. In my artist statement, my first sentence is, I paint what makes me stop and stare, usually when I'm on my way to something else. It's ADD in action.
Thank you. We have one more question.
Actually, it's 3 questions. Do you ever use any sort of masking or frisket paper or anything?
Yes, a lot of my nocturnes will have masking because otherwise those aren't going to happen. And what happens if you don't use it for nocturnes is you start painting around things incorrectly, and then it looks terrible. So I have a love-hate relationship with masking fluid. Yes, it keeps the whites, but then when you take it off, it's never what you wanted. It's this giant light bulb blob that has no business being there. And then you have to spend twice the time and extra careful to fix it. So there's a trade-off.
Question, second part is, what is that mister you're using?
Ah,
Is that just a squeeze bottle? Do you have a pump in there? or
no,
what?
it is for hairdressers. I forgot the brand. I will look it up. It's from Amazon. Yeah. And what happens when you hold it, it will just keep going, which is fantastic. And it's so nice because I've had other spray bottles that all of a sudden in the middle of using it decide to just be a stream instead of a spray. And it's horrid. So I can spray this up here and let that water fall down and it doesn't mess anything up.
And the last part is, when you're doing a show, what is the question that you really hate to hear?
Okay, I'm going to censor myself. First is, did you do these? Yeah. Oh man. I don't know. Or it's like, why is this so expensive if you were so fast at it? It's like, well, it took me, between my different art experiences, 30 years to do this in one go. And I tell people that it's a lot like blowing glass. Yeah, it looks really easy. You know how hard that is to just not make a colossal disaster. So yeah, there's a lot of posturing, and people become art critics when they come. And then I've had people come up to me and go, these are all blurry. Okay. You hear everything. And having come from advertising, I'm like, yeah, whatever.
I have a question here.
Do you do wet on wet or like?
Oh, we are going to do wet on wet. Buckle up. These are the background things that have to be nice and dry and behaved. And then I will start adding. A lot of this will go a lot faster. This stage takes a little bit longer. Any other questions, or I will use a hairdryer?
Yes. If there are clouds in the sky, do you go around them or do you wipe or tissue them out?
Yes, to all those things. It depends what the picture looks like. I will try and leave some white alone, because if you really need that sharp summer sky contrast, you don't want to be removing it because there's always going to be paint left over. But if you just have fuzzy clouds that are kind of like, yeah, I'm here, then you use the tissue.
Okay. A moment.
Okay, another question. As a new watercolorist, what advice would you give or suggestion for really working with your composition? Because I don't want to just copy things that I like. I want to add my own spin to it. But is there any way to learn that, or
How to add things?
just how to fool with the composition?
As when I'm evaluating composition, I will use the rule of thirds. And I have an app, this app is showing me my picture right now, but it has an option and this is just for me laying out, not for changing it so much. But when you change it, you need to stay within perspective. It has to be correct. And so a grid just helps you kind of keep track of what you're doing, because I've done stuff where I've suddenly made, you know, Frankenstein in the middle of the painting. I'm like, oh, that's too big. So this, yeah, no. Oh. There. Yes? Okay, now I can't move. So I can ask it to show thirds. And I don't know if you can see the lines, but it will divide it for you just so you can evaluate. And I keep that on when I'm doing all my rough sketches, because it's faster for me to learn. Can I draw without the grid? Yeah, it's going to take me longer because then I'm correcting a whole bunch of stuff, and that's really, eh. And it has a whole bunch of different grids. But what I love that this thing does, it will go to, okay, turn this off. Done. I can ask it to show it to me just in black and white. And that one I find is a little bit too severe and not realistic for painting. It can go to 3 levels of gray, which is very good. And for me, these are all, people are like, you're cheating. I'm like, well, I'm teaching my brain, and if that's cheating, so be it. I'm just getting there faster. There's 4 levels, you know, you can play with this thing, but it just helps you see it and learn it. That's all what my whole focus is when I paint. It's like, learn this thing before you go and do it. What's it called? It's called Grid Painter. Apple. Does not come on, I had a Samsung for a little while because it had a better camera, and doesn't work on that. On Apple is great. Anyway, okay. Other questions?
Yes. What type of board do you use to attach the watercolor paper sheet to while you're painting?
Okay, this is from Menards, and it is corrugated plastic, maybe? You want to get one that's pretty smooth. I had one that had ridges that were a little bit too pronounced, and they were showing up in the painting, like a coin rub. But when I work at home, I have a plexiglass on my easel, and I just tape it to that. But sometimes I will do pours, like with paint, and I keep it on this because then I can do all kinds of stuff with this and get it all over my couch. It's great.
Do you prefer to paint in this long, narrow format typically? And if yes, why?
Yes, I do. I find myself subconsciously gravitating toward this, and I think it's because it's the golden ratio, where it's twice as long as it is wide, and it just feels right to humans. I also like squares for a little while, but then they were too much of a pain to frame for the tent, so I gave up on that. But rectangle, and I'm usually portrait. I do have some landscapes, but you really got to twist my arm to do that. Yeah, okay. Almost dry. I forgot to get rid of telephone poles, so now we're going to backtrack.
We have a question in the audience.
Have you ever made a painting where, you know, like where you put the salt onto like the painting and wait for it to dry?
I have sometimes, but I'm too impatient to wait for salt to dry. That's the truth. Okay. I was going to do this with a palette knife, but I waited too long. So now I'm doing it with a brush. And all I'm doing is lifting the sky off these poles. I was going to do it with a palette knife when it was still damp, because then you can really scrape it easily. Once it's dry, no more. But this gets the same effect. So this is the lazy person's masking. If you ever want to make light bulbs in a nocturne, get a Q-tip after you're done painting and just rub where the light is. And it's nice and soft and it looks like a diffused bulb as opposed to this, you know, extraterrestrial. Yeah, these are a mix of a mask and then I went in with a Q-tip to give it that glow. You spend a lot of time fixing mask. It's very, I don't know. Yeah. Okay, now okay, you're catching me doing what I should not be doing. I'm blowing up the picture so I can see better. And I shouldn't, because I should just be painting what I saw when I stood there. I couldn't see who was standing on the stairs in that far corner. So, okay, anyway. So you want to get it just a little damp. I never like to paint on completely dry unless it's a really, really last, like telephone lines, I will do dry. Most everything else, it doesn't need to be wet on wet, but it just shouldn't be dry because then you get that dry, cakey look like old bacon. And then it's not dark enough yet. But what I do to check my values, this is red plexiglass. I don't know if you can see it against the light. What I will do is I will stand back, especially when I'm using a photo reference and I want a quick check. I look through both at the same time, and you guys can come up here and do this later. And I start comparing, because this takes away all color, all you see are the lights and darks. So I will compare like what I'm doing to, is it matching the lights and darks in this picture? And it's a very fast way to keep looking and making sure you're on target for the values, because those are more important than the color. And this was Home Depot, or you can get it on Amazon and then cut it. Yeah, just smooth your edges. But this is great, even for landscape or plein air. The minute you can see this, it's like everything just comes into shape and you don't need that digital thing. Cheating again, yes. Okay, so the buildings, let's see. This is, oh, my Spanish brush, Escoda. I'm trying to keep to cobalt because that's what I used before. So it's going to keep everything in the family. And then a little burnt sienna, which is warmer. And you just start suggesting things. And then there's a yellow sign here that I want to protect and bring in later because it's going to call back to the yellows that are on the window frames of the main building. And transparent brown, there's some stairs. And there's some darks going on here. And this is one of my Bali blues. And it's warmer than the other blue, so it kind of works as a really dark green. And sometimes I don't talk when I'm picking colors. I go into this flow state and I don't know what I'm doing, and it just kind of happens. So if you see something, remember where it was that I did it, and then hopefully I can answer. And there's some shrubbery. And we'll use the same yellow I'm going to use later.
Maria, there's a question from the
Yeah.
online audience. What qualities or characteristics do you look for when you buy a brush?
It holds its shape, it bounces back, it holds water and color, I don't like mushy brushes. I have a whole bunch of really expensive Isbey Kolinsky mops that are useless because they just look like dough once you use it once. So I was not impressed. Mm. Right. Here, I do have to use yellow ochre. There's a little bit of texture in these buildings, not that you'd see it, but it's just nice to feel. So use the side of your brush. And then there's just some few darks, not a lot, to keep your eye interested, is what I think. Tell me if my head is totally in the way. Okay, sorry. There is a very light blue to that. And then this. And there's some reds going on. I don't know what it is, but it's interesting. So we'll throw it in there. I will sometimes use a dry brush just to give it some texture when I don't want a big color break. And blue greens. This is in the background, so all my greens will be kind of blue because they're not really front and center.
Maria, there's a question from the audience. How
Sure.
often should you change your water?
That's why I have a clear jar. When it gets a little bit murkier than this, I should rinse it out, but it also depends. If I'm going to keep painting darker, it doesn't matter. If I have to go in and highlight something, then yeah, I will go get clean water. Or if I want to pull something back out, I will do it with clean water. Like when I pulled this pole, the water was still pretty clean. So you don't want a surprise color on there because you will see it because it's so light. And what I'm looking for when I'm painting this is just matching the value and kind of the color tone. And part of it is my brain going, okay, that's far away. Don't make it so bright. And part of it is just kind of looking at the picture and being like, yeah, okay, we have to add a mountain. There are mountains in Sitka. So more of this green. There's not a tight line there, so I don't want a really sharp edge. I'm sorry for my head. That's almost too green. So take it down a little and add its complement. There. And what's hard as you build this is something looks really dark right now, but it will balance itself out when you put the real darks in. So that's kind of, you just learn by doing. All right, trees. Where's my tree brush? I like a very skinny. Those are dark. Okay. Dark and not too bright. Oh, it's still wet. Drop in a little color where you already painted and it will kind of fill itself in. Yes, I'm very particular with fussy trees. And all of a sudden that roof starts to pop because you put something so dark there. And then my favorite part of these kind of paintings when I have a lot of pencil on there is to go back in and erase the pencil. Oh, that's so sad. That's only second to pulling the masking tape away.
Maria, someone from home is asking what you just did to turn down that green.
I added its complement, so I dropped in a little bit of burnt sienna.
Thank you. Do you dip your brush into your paint pens even though it carries other colors while you're working? Does this contaminate the colors on your palette?
I wash them afterwards, so yes. I try not to, but it happens. Okay. Then there's things here. There's little, I don't know what's back here. Awnings, maybe. A lawnmower, who knows? It's just stuff. Paint stuff. And there was a little telephone pole back here, but I'm like, it's incidental. It's so small. It's not going to be in the painting. What you do want to get right is like where the cutoffs are. If there's a bright white roof, you want to make sure that that stays tight because that is pleasing to your eye. And it says, yes, there's a story here and there's stuff getting smaller and it just works. Okay, I'm gonna leave that alone. A car. Oh, cars. Cars are just a box. Where's my angled brush? I like to do cars very quickly and simply, and using an angled flat brush helps because otherwise you start drawing. And if you catch yourself holding the brush like this, drop everything and go outside for a few minutes. No. And so since this car is so far away, I just want to hit the back because it's dark. And I can add some neutral tint to whatever color I have here. I really don't care what color it is. I just want a dark. And that may need to be more dark. I also like mixing lunar black with stuff because it's very granular and has a nice effect on other colors. Look, a car. The less you think about them, the easier they are to draw. Otherwise, you will make moon creatures. That's too much blue. And the reason I also like cobalt blue is because it's what reflects from the sky in shadows a little more so than ultramarine. Ultramarine is great for dark shadows, but stuff where it's just a little floaty shadow, like in a big bright spot, like when you do dappled light with leaves, cobalt blue. And then I'm leaving that alone.
Maria,
Okay.
are there any other objects besides cars that you find challenging to paint?
Sometimes statues get me confused because it's not a person and it's a rock and there's different things going on. So those I have to practice those. Okay, there is a nice dark shadow right along this house and I want to get that done and move on. So here is where I will use ultramarine blue. And then burnt sienna. And then we test, good. Okay. And the rest of this is mushed into shrubbery, so we don't really care what goes on there. Okay. Now, the back of this car has just a little bit of shadow, and we're not going to do anything very complicated, just that. I'm all about what makes your brain go, yeah, I believe that. Stop there. Okay, there's a bunch of little cars here that aren't really important, but it just adds to the texture of the scene because it is so ramshackle and I just want to suggest them. Okay, do not make the picture bigger. I have to remind myself. Okay, so I'm going to go in with my cobalt blue first because they are in shadow and they're very cold. And then there's something going on here. We're being very, very careful. And then burnt sienna. Stick to your palette. It's very easy to be like, oh, this color matches, don't do it. Make that color. Especially if you want to retain like harmony for the picture. Like there's some fender here, I don't know. And then that's always fun to add backlights. Where's my alizarin crimson? And if you can paint cars all in one go, they have a very nice loose feel. And if you've made mistakes, the sins are kind of covered up. So. This is some kind of garbage can. That's all in the dark. And then I'm always very conscious of grounding things. So I will run a brush with almost no color underneath something because I hate when stuff looks like it's just floating. That's too big. Oops. Okay. And okay. I don't know what else is back here, but anyway. Oh, did I? This is going to have to be darker. Anyway, all this is in deep shadow. So I will be going over this with a wash of blues. And then there's just like tiny bits of white that you really want to keep because that's what kind of carries your eye through the picture, this rhythm of all the whites. And then here are more cars. Where's my blue? I'm just getting the stuff that's less important over with so to speak. And I'm making sure I keep this stuff in shadow and not bright because they're not part of the big. So you can start seeing how the light's playing. So some of the snow is blue. Let that dry for half a minute. I'll start on this house. Remember how I said I don't paint with yellow ochre? I lied. Because this house is in shadow, it's a very murky color, even though the top of it is like a bright yellow. And so to get that weird shadow color, I will mix a little bit of yellow ochre. And if it goes dingy, I'm okay because it is a dingy color. And then this will get corrected more because I'm going to pass through this whole thing with a blue. So and that's the regular color house. Oops, forgot to paint a part of it. Okay. Anyway, now what I forgot was there's some stuff going on here, like window or tree or shrub thing. And I'm always conscious of what is brighter when I'm going to paint something darker over it, because that's where magic happens and your eye goes, oh, wow, cool. Then you believe it. When you see a dark shadow in front of a light background, then it makes sense to your brain. So try not to make everything dark. And then I will leave this alone. And then I'm going to come back and there's snow here, but it's light blue snow because it's in shadow. This looks like a hot mess now, doesn't it? Okay, there's something here. I don't know what it is. Some other house. Too much. Okay. Still damp. Okay, we'll do the fun part now. I didn't draw my snow line. Okay. Bigger angled brush. We're going to fix. I'm going to tell myself where to stop with snow, so I'm going to paint the red, a little red background. And what I'm painting right now are what the highlights of this corrugated roof look like. So I'm not being super careful, but I will protect my lights. So. Okay, leave that alone. Then this is where I always have indecision. Do I do the yellows first or do I wait and leave them alone and do them at the end? Both have advantages. I think I'm going to wait. I'm going to do the house. And it's a lot of burnt sienna with what I see. And a little bit of orange because it's just popping like crazy. I always try to not use just a single color. I try to add something to it.
Can we see the reference photo before you go further?
See? Yes? Are we buying it? Yeah. Okay, have I sold you the car yet? Okay, this is where you really want to test your colors because you want to get this on the first go. You don't want to go back in and start adding. Transparent orange. Oh yeah, okay, we're good. Now this is one of the Alvaro mop brushes and it lets me be precise enough to use it. Okay, what's your brush? And I never spray down here. I spray up here and just let it rain down. Otherwise, you're going to make a puddle and you're going to wait for about 20 minutes. So. I'm sorry if my head's in the way. This is there. Then we're coming in with something darker. This will get another layer on top. And with architecture, lots of times you really have to let stuff dry if it's like a hero part of the painting. Otherwise, it's all going to mush together and you will lose your angles and then it doesn't look right. And I want to suggest just a little bit of the siding, but I'm going to wait till this paint sets a little more. And then this gets stronger as it's going back. So I start adding a little bit of quinacridone scarlet. I can't pronounce that word. Okay. I ate too much. All right. And then this one has more orange. Don't paint over your snow. All right. Okay. Color is less intense on stuff that faces the sun directly. And there's a bright blue paint that I need to not paint over, otherwise I won't get the effect I want. There's here. It's here too, but this is going to get a really dark shadow. But you want it underneath, otherwise it doesn't feel connected. It doesn't feel right. Yeah. This is what I see. No. Yeah. And I'm not blowing it up. I'm not looking at details, being very good. I want you all to witness this because I will catch myself being like, oh, what's in there? No.
Yeah, right.
No, I left it alone. I'm making stuff up. It's just business back there. You don't need to know what's back there. It's like, if I can't see it standing there, then why would I paint it? That's how I think about it. Like what I'm really focused on is this crazy colored restaurant. And like, even if I don't hit this color right, leave it alone. And
This get water.
a little bit, not too much. That's really the fibers absorbing the paint doing that. I'm not misting hard enough. You would see water spots if I misted hard enough to affect the pigments. All right. I'm going to exercise self-discipline and leave that alone for a minute. And there's part of this awning thing that is a different red. That's a contrast. So that's going to be more Quin Scarlet than anything else, with just a waft of blue. And even some alizarin crimson, because it's so bright. There, that's it. Okay. Sorry. Can you see it? Okay. It's not a huge difference, but it makes, you need to nail it because it looks better. There's this thing here. And then it comes all the way around. And normally I would paint like the interior of windows and then do the frame, but because these colors are so bright and important, I do them first because everything else is just mush on the inside. Who cares? And there's some alpine thing going on. I don't know what it is. But this place, when I walked by, was always busy. So let that dry. And then it has this weird wooden alpine fence with like some carvings in it. And I want to suggest it, but I don't want to sit there and do like, you know. So I get, where is it? This brush. Aw. Okay. I guess people call it a rigger. I don't know. I call it my sideways brush. And then water this a little bit here and there. And then raw sienna seems to be doing it. And then I will go in a little darker, but it's just a very fast. I don't know if you can see me. I'm not spending a lot of detail because it's like weathered wood. You don't want a solid color because there's whites, there's darks. So I'm going to let that sit, and then I'm going to come in with something a little bit darker, and then maybe just suggest a couple of these. Like with patterns, when you see brick, like I love to paint brick. There's no brick in this, but I will do a little section of brick and then leave it alone. I'm sure it's in some of my other paintings. I won't do the whole thing because then your brain's like, yeah, that's brick, whatever. You just need a little bit to suggest, and then you can move on. So same thing here. There's a whole lot of detail, but I don't want to do all of it, even though oh, I could spend days. And this rigger is nice because it holds its point, so I can even use the side of it if I'm too lazy to put this down and pick up a different brush. Yeah. And then it looks like raw umber is the answer.
Maria, when you're choosing your colors right now, audience members wondering, are you thinking warmer or cooler?
Yes, warmer. Like I know I'm in sunlight, so I have to be cognizant of that, but I'm also paying attention to what the textures are because I know I'm painting wood, so my brain is kind of engaged, but I'm trying to just keep my eyes doing it as opposed to, I know what a plank is. Yeah, it's a fine line. But there's a little bit of shadow and then just some of this smeary. And then it's a little bit warmer. Oh. And then what happens, I let this dry and then I can come in with a very fine liner and add some of these little details that will tell you that it's this alpine railing or whatever it is. But that starts to feel like wood, even though it's not. And this is almost dry enough to do the bright colors. So I'll do the inside for a little bit. Insides are fun. You just don't get carried away with too much detail. I usually like to wet it first. And again, see, I'm being lazy. I'm not changing my brush. Because then everything pulls together and just kind of like creates its own imagery. And you don't need to know what's in there, that there's a fridge or a door or whatever. It's just stuff going in and out, like when you walk past a window. And again, cobalt blue. There's something going on here. I don't know. Yeah. There's two windows, I can see that. And it gets darker up here. Oh, come on. I want a little bit of dark because it is dark. Let's do this. Okay, leave that alone. And there's more of this color here under this awning. I don't know what it is. And then, that's getting too dark. Stop it. Okay. And what I want to do with some cobalt blue is pull down this color a little bit. It's almost too much. Let that dry. And then I will put a darker shadow. There's also like this overhang of snow, which I want to keep, but that's going to have to be 2 steps. Okay. The insides of the windows up here, angled brush, 1 stroke, you're done. What is it?
Maria, there was a question about what you were dabbing with to pick up the color.
Oh, paper towel. Here we go. Okay. I have this pool of like murky dark color. That's going to be my darks for most everything because then it'll be consistent, even if it's not perfectly matching the photo. It's like windows are dark because they're interiors. So pick a color that plays nice. And then when I'm all done, I'm going to go in and hit this with the bright yellow. And when I hit these darks, you start relieving the sunlight because then you start seeing that play. And like this needs to be softened. This was way too harsh. I must have been talking. Nothing in the distance is ever that sharp. Okay, what can I paint next? Always test. Don't just go and paint because then you'll be miserable. The roof. The roof is a gray, but it's so lit by the sun, it looks green. So you have to find some kind of happy medium. It's very quick. No. And I'm always trying to add like a little bit of texture as I go. Sometimes it's with spray, sometimes it's just touching it with a paper towel to like change the plane so it's not this solid color. So boring. And there's like a little bit of shadow on this eave. Is that what it's called? I don't know, part of the roof. So that's there. And this actually has more, okay, wait, see? Yeah, inconsequential. But I'll pull it out so it's not so tight. And I don't really care what I'm doing to the telephone pole because that's going to be darker anyway. And shame on me, I have painted over my snow. Sometimes you can rescue it. Anyway. No, my grid is on. I don't want it. I always take the grid off when I paint because the grid is a color And when you're painting and you have that much more color from the grid, it starts affecting how you see. So turn it off. And I always make you, this thing will let you pick a color for the grid. I always pick a color that's in the painting so that it's more harmonious and your brain doesn't start thinking it needs to add neon green, which is the default color. Okay, what else? There's busy bits, but we're gonna wait. How about some snow? There's snow on this, my roof. And it's not a lot. It does look like pure white, but there's just a hint of like a light blue showing you the texture of the roof, which I think is interesting because it's not this big snowman snow. Some people will argue I don't need it, but I do. Then you want to get a very, 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 very light blue. And I mean really light, like almost nothing. And there's some kind of, I'm trying to fill in stuff while I wait for this area to dry. So there's some kind of mural going on this. There's a painting on the side of the building. So I'm just going to doodle something in. And then I like to add a little water, not the whole thing. And then it's a bright red. So alizarin crimson, maybe. I don't know what it is. Anyway, leave the yellow for the frame. And then, yeah, this is what I saw. Okay. It's very easy to fall in the rabbit hole of like, oh, wait, let me get that just right. No one's looking. No one's going to come audit you and be like, I'm sorry, the shadow on that abstract painting is wrong. It's like, okay. I am going to hit this with a hair dryer and then we can continue. And the wet on wet is coming. It's at the very end. Oh, wow. Oh my gosh. Okay. What do you want to see me finish? The shadow across the street. Okay, yeah. That's the one where you take a swig of whiskey first. I'm going to add the little yellow windows because it makes me happy. And then I will do the big shadow. Okay. I wanted to finish. From here, that one's white. This is yellow. I want to add this dark shadow. Bead painting. It's a little bit darker. Than that. Oh well. All right, I will do the roof and then I will do the big shadows. We are going to use, where is my stripey brush? Here. Okay, I don't know if you can see this brush, but it's zigzagged. And so it lets you create, you know how corrugated roofs look. So get it a little wet. And then it's a really dark. So Quinn Scarlet and some cobalt blue. Test. Good. You want it kind of dry. I don't know if it's dark enough. There we go. I didn't dry it enough. But anyway. It's a texture that tells you, yes, it's not a smooth roof. And then sometimes you can cheat. Okay. This needs to be darker to make the snow pop. So I am looking at the cement here. All right, shadow. I'm going to paint this. I'm going to paint this. Big boy. So a little cobalt blue. The rest of this mess I made before. Some ultramarine blue. Test. Ooh, where are you going? Stop that. More. This is where ultramarine really comes into play because it's a nice dark. If I were painting this calmly, I would be doing the shadows last. Okay. So. Goes up over the snow. This is in shadow. All of this is in shadow. And then when I was talking about before about keeping your background light, these posts are all in shadow. And then you want to take another brush and just gently touch this to soften it a little. Shadows become sharper the closer they are to you. And then this is all in shadow. And then And even if it doesn't match, it doesn't matter. Then what I like to do is my cobalt. This is when you get the light play. And then you just touch. Shadow. And then this needs to dry a second, and then I need to add the spread. I don't want this spreading. This shadow right down here is very, very tight because I'm close to it. So I don't want it bleeding as much as all the other mess. And then what also is going on is this blue. There's like snow chunks, as we're all familiar with. Nothing fancy. But then there's this section here where it's been driven over, so it's a different feel. And so you want to suggest that texture. This is much lighter than that deep shadow. And quick hair dryer. So right here is some really strong shadow. And if you get that right, it needs to be dry. That will tell you that the sun is really hitting it hard. Oh, sorry. I'm using a lot more paint than water. Yeah, that's dark enough. Okay. So it doesn't have to be perfect, but it does have to be tight. And then I will pull some of these with my brush after I do all of them. And it's so funny, it looks wrong as you do it, and then you step away and come back and you're like, oh yeah, that's shadow. So some of these, as they go farther back, draw the water towards the paint. Don't drag the paint out. Behaves very differently. Yeah, that's enough. And then there's a shadow behind this gigantic garbage bin. That's pale on the snow, but then it gets super dark behind it. And I ideally should let that dry, but meh. Lucky for you all, I have a pre-baked version of this painting that's been finished.
Maria, so we have 5 minutes left, so I want to get in a
Sure.
couple more questions.
Absolutely.
Especially one that came in earlier. Do you have any favorite watercolor artists, past or present, who you like, whose work you'd like to study?
John Singer Sargent, for his immediacy, for his speed. You can see how fast he painted. And that is such a skill set. Alvaro Castañet for just pure energy and color and capturing a scene with like 3 brush strokes. I don't know how he does it. Joseph Zbukovic, he's Australian. He's a contemporary of Alvaro Castañet's, and his shorthand is amazing. I'm not keen on his palette because his eyes see something different than mine, but how he just suggests boats and these really complicated things, and then you look and it's like 4 strokes. How? Those are the big ones.
And also, Where do you have the prints of your paintings done and what type of paper are your prints done?
Ah, they are done on cold press. They are Z-clay, so they're super fancy French thing. They are done in Florida, in Pensacola, by a company called the Stackhouse. I cannot recommend them enough, and I probably order thousands. They are fantastic. The key, though, coming from advertising, I know how to use Photoshop and photograph and get my colors right before I send them. That is paramount. You must send correct colors. Otherwise, they will just print what they see. And if it looks like it was shot on an iPhone, you're going to get a print that looks like it was shot on an iPhone. So color correcting first is really important. This is interesting. I'm just going to keep going until you tell me to stop. It's getting there. Thank you. All right, if you want me to stop and you guys want to come see the palettes or whatever, I can do that. Okay, so I'll show you the pre-baked version. I knew I wasn't going to finish because I know me. So this is the finished one. Sorry. There we go. And that color's hideous. Look at it from here. Oh yeah, come try this. It shows you your values. Yeah, yeah. Trip over it. Yeah.
That's for you.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Yes, no worries.
We want to thank Maria and the DuPage Art League for generously giving her time and effort to provide this presentation. I will send several resource links in an email tomorrow morning. If you're watching the recording of this presentation, you may request these links by emailing us at CE, that's CE for Community Engagement at wheatonlibrary.org, CE@wheatonlibrary.org. The recording of this program will be available on the library's YouTube page within a week. Thanks again for joining us. Take care, and we hope to see you again soon. Good night.